Andrew calling.
That works for you. I'll be there.
So
Hello? I don't know how to do that, Andrew. It's somebody else. What are you talking
I
about?
know kind of.
We're on the phone.
Can somebody give me a thumbs up if they can hear us over Zoom?
Oh, yes, we can hear.
We can hear you too. Hi.
God.
Coming through loud and clear, Heidi.
Hey, thanks. Okay, so since we can hear you, can everybody mute their Zoom, I guess? Yeah. We should have done that.
I muted. Well, they unmuted actually. I know.
Okay, we're gonna get started then. And I have the pleasure of introducing Heidi. And I've been thinking about what do I want to share. And so coming into this room, I was thinking, okay, now, I really want to share like how fun it is to work with Heidi, right? And then I come in and I'm like, what is going on? So it's here, your fun is spread. So let's see, how did we meet? I don't remember actually. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, so interested in firefighting and wildland fire research, and yeah, we worked together on that first project. But so see, I get the nervous out for you, so then you can. So I just wanted to share, and I know that people in this room know this about Heidi, but one of the things I think that is a great strength of hers that really lended itself to this research project that she'll describe is her ability to really connect with people. And so that is definitely important for not only the type of research that she's going to describe that she has done, but for nutrition education and having that behavior change in nutrition that we want to see. And so I think you are in the right field and on the right track. And I am just really excited for you to share your results and
Thank you, Annie. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for making the journey in person or logging in over Zoom. There's some technical hiccups, but nothing we can't overcome, I don't think. So welcome to all of you, and those of you in person, help yourself to the goodies and stickers, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. So today we are here for my defense, which that's kind of a scary word, but I'm really excited to share with you my project titled Utilizing Focus Groups to Identify Nutrition Education Needs and Implementation Strategies for the Wildland Firefighter. So a few of you know this about me, but for those of you who don't, I'll let you know that I fought wildland fire for a couple years, and that's kind of how I got interested in this sort of niche. So to kind of calm my nerves and make it feel a little more, I guess, back to my roots, I thought I would kind of get it started like a lot of wildland firefighters start their day. So in a lot of more high-risk environments, briefings are utilized to kind of lay the groundwork for what's going on for that day, for that mission. If there's like a change in leadership or a change in the assignment, then a briefing is given. So I thought I would kind of go with that style because it was one of my favorite parts of working in wildland fire was the morning, kind of figuring out what we were going to do for the day. Because anybody that knows me knows that I like a plan. So typical briefings vary a lot. Like I said, it can be on an assignment or back at the station where the wildland firefighters kind of start their normal type day. And normally back at station, it's after exercise and coffee's kind of being sipped and everybody gathers around a big sort of table and discusses what's important for that day in the operations. So one of the elements that's of utmost importance for the wildland firefighter is knowing their environment. So day to day, that looks like fire weather forecast in the morning. So I know it's kind of grim outside, but I kind of wanted to run you through the highlights of the weather. morning, the fire weather planning forecast doesn't look real fire danger out there right now, but discussion for Idaho. Mostly cloudy skies, below normal temperatures, and mountain snow showers could be expected today. Stronger showers this afternoon may bring breezy westerly winds with gusts up to 20 miles per hour for brief periods of time. An active pattern is still on track for Saturday and early Sunday as another weather system brings wintry conditions to the entire region. Several inches of snow is expected in the mountains, with even light accumulations for the valleys through Sunday morning. A brief lull in the weather is expected Monday before another wet but warmer system moves in Tuesday and Wednesday. So then we go through the local kind of zone weather, talking about the potential for lightning and the relative humidity, things like that. So then the next part of the briefing is what's called the situational report, which is kind of like a nationwide report on what's going on as far as fire activity, where the newer starts are occurring, how big are the large fires, who's committed nationwide. So some of the points on here that are important are initial attack activity right now is light, with only 73 new fires, as we would expect right now. Uncontained large fires, there are 10. There's 2 type 1 teams committed, and that just kind of lets you know the strain on the wildland firefighting workforce, really. Getting in a little more detailed, so this map breaks down the different Forest Service regions. And throughout the situational report, you can kind of see region by region what's going on. So that might give you an idea of where you might be sent next, so on. And then to kind of finish out the typical briefing before the daily operations are discussed, the 6 minutes for safety is talked about. So this is kind of an initiative, fire agency wide, to implement some education in the briefing and get some of these topics brought up that are important to talk about. So today's topic, it's kind of a lottery system. Today's topic for April 15th is wildland urban interface structure protection. So then it kind of is just a prompt of discussion for the crew to talk about this subject for the day. So I'm sharing all this with you because I'll kind of come back to it a little later. So remember this 6 minutes for safety kind of happens at the end of the morning briefing every day. So kind of at the heart of every briefing should be what's called leader's intent. And in your fire training, you learn about that early, that you kind of have to describe to your population or whoever's listening to your briefing and whoever it applies to why they're listening and kind of what the goal is. People kind of want to know what's the end goal, what's the buy-in, why should I listen to you? So today, kind of at the heart of this presentation, I'd like to introduce you to this topic, my project, also introduce you to myself and the population that we're kind of interested in. I hope to inform you about nutrition education, where it's currently at in the wildland firefighting scene. I'm going to report my findings from my focus group project. And I hope to make some helpful suggestions on how I see nutrition education, hopefully looking in the future for the wildland firefighter. So I'll start with just a really kind of short background story on myself. So I fought wildland fire for 5 summers, much like something like 33,000 other individuals kind of recently in the United States to fight wildland fire. And I opted to do it just kind of as a way to make fairly quick money in the summer. And I liked the idea of being outside for work. And I knew that it was arduous or like physically demanding, but I don't know, those around me kind of encouraged me, and it wasn't anything that I was going to shy away from. So I signed up to do that and started fighting fire the summer after my freshman year, studying food science here at U of I. And my first fire season was my first hard lesson in nutrition and how it varies for the wildland firefighter. So I remember the first project that we got assigned to before the season really kicked off was prescribed burning, so lighting fires on purpose. And that was kind of even before I got my primary training, so it was very much an immersive experience. And I remember just being kind of panicked because that was the most fire I had really seen. It was hot, it was smoky, I was stressed, I was 18, I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't even know how to use the radio really. So I remember just being stressed, and I felt pretty haggard at around 3 o'clock. And I remember one of the more senior crew members hiked by, and they saw, even under my hard hat and sunglasses, they could tell that I was in a bad place. And she was super nice. She asked how I was doing, and she offered me some Skittles. And I remember thinking, I don't know, I don't think I really need those. Skittles aren't very good for you. You know, I'm studying nutrition and food, and I'm supposed to be a role model for all these people, and Skittles are added sugar. That's not good for you. So I was like, I had a balanced breakfast. I had a decent lunch. I'm good, you know, and I just, you know, much to everybody's surprise, said, no, I'm fine, and went about my day, thought dinner will be coming soon, I'll be fine. And little did I know dinner would be pretty late that night because the burn went later than we had thought, and I didn't pack any more snacks. And I just remember being in shock because I thought I knew a lot about nutrition and how to fuel myself. And I thought in that realm, I would be prepared, but I was not. So I learned from my mistakes, much like a lot of wildland firefighters have, and kind of learned by doing, learned from friends, and went on, continued to fight fire for 4 more seasons. And then kind of in my last season was when I really got interested in the study of nutrition for the wildland firefighter as my studies in food science went on. So I guess if you talk with people about things long enough or talk about a topic, you're going to get connected with the right folks. So luckily I did, and was able to work with some researchers here, that would be Annie and Sam, and get involved with wildland firefighter health and safety research. And even before that, I was conducting my own surveys in the field without IRB approval or any sort of oversight. I think I just wanted an excuse to kind of get the conversation going. So I've always loved conversations with wildland firefighters, and this project seemed to be the perfect fit, which I feel very lucky. So just a little bit more background on exactly what the wildland firefighter sees as far as demands. So we often refer to the wildland firefighter as a tactical athlete. So that sort of description includes elements of strength, power, speed, agility, cardio endurance, muscle stamina, flexibility, and mobility. And the kind of difference in a tactical athlete or more occupational type athlete is this is their job. They don't just train for one big event like a marathon or an ultra, and then it's over and they can recover. They're expected to practice these power, speed, endurance day after day, you know, assignment after assignment for the entire summer with pretty minimal rest between. It's environmentally and physically demanding work. So yes, it's physically demanding, but there's a lot of other elements involved that make this work challenging. So those include heat, so ambient heat from air temperatures, hot air temperatures, because that's when fires typically burn, as well as just the heat given off from burning debris and some of the heat entrapped in the personal protective clothing that they have to wear. The altitude is another factor that you can try to prep for, but you never know where you're getting sent on assignment, and that could be very taxing. So a crew from South Carolina could be ordered up and go to Colorado and expected to perform. Low humidity, much like I discussed the time of year being hot, oftentimes fires burn in low humidity types of environments. Compromised diet, because they're often supported by the actual fire camp and fed out of that camp. So it might not be what they're used to, or they're traveling, working long hours, the diet could be compromised. The work is load bearing. They have to carry their equipment, their tools, things like that, which increases the caloric expenditure. Oftentimes they're sleep deprived from working long shifts, back-to-back shifts, things like that, traveling. So all in all, caloric demands have been estimated at around 29. Oh, we have a question, I think. Maybe? Okay, never mind. Caloric demands of 2,900 to around 6,000 kcals per day, depending on the individual and the kind of resource type and assignment, which is a lot. Wow. Types of crews. So although the basic kind of mission is the same, put the fire out, not all crews are created equal. So there are a number of different resource types, but yes, they all have the same objective. The ways they kind of vary, some of the ways, are by physical fitness levels and kind of the requirements, the standards that are held throughout the crew. Mode of transportation, so planes, trains, no, engines, helicopters, you name it. They hike there, driving trucks. Their role on the wildfire incident, that could vary greatly. There are a lot of different roles on the incident, and they all have very different energy demands. Physical demands of the actual assignment, kind of like I was just talking about. Knowledge of various equipment may kind of dictate where they get placed on the incident. And with all this, energy demands vary greatly. So, the importance. The wildland firefighter population relies upon their bodies to complete difficult work in remote and rugged settings. Nutrition education has little emphasis in the current educational framework. So now I want to give you some background on the current state of nutrition education. So when wildland firefighters start their career and become red carded, they have to attend guard school, which is kind of their initial training. And I think that's, I don't know, usually 2 days. And of all of that training, there's about a 20-minute video on wildland firefighter kind of health topics that they're supposed to show. During that video, around 4 minutes of nutrition content is shared. Think back to your briefing this morning. During the 6 minutes for safety, like I said, that's kind of a lottery system of different topics. And nutrition holds one of 223 topics in the discussion points. About 500 or so apprentices are appointed in the wildland fire world, where they get kind of trained up and I guess encouraged into career type positions. So they're put through kind of a more health oriented training. It's like a 3-day course during the academy. And like I said, that's around 500 out of 33,000 wildland firefighters. So they're put through 5 hours of nutrition education during academy. So that's kind of a unique opportunity. Not many get to experience. And then there's 2 other courses, comprehensive well-being and resilience, as well as introductory principles and techniques of physical fitness development, which are both kind of just overall wildland firefighter health type courses that different individuals can kind of catch wind and try to apply to get into, but it's not widely taught. It's kind of a unique opportunity. So our purpose for this study was to identify specific nutrition education needs and guide future nutrition education development for the wildland firefighters. So we had a few aims. Aim 1, describe the current state of wildland firefighter nutrition education. Part A, who wildland firefighters currently receive nutrition information from, how education is delivered, and the topics covered. Aim 2 of this project was to identify topics of importance for nutrition education as self-identified by the wildland firefighter, as determined by previous research that are currently overlooked in the framework right now. And aim 3, describe implementation strategies for tailored nutrition education for the wildland firefighter. So bringing that all together and coming up with some ways to implement. How were the aims achieved? So what did we choose as a tool to try to achieve these aims? Well, we involved wildland firefighters throughout the whole process, even in the kind of preliminary phase, deciding how we would want to go about this. We decided to use focus group research, which for those of you who are not familiar, this is kind of a group style interview with a moderator type person asking a sequence of questions. So we decided to use focus group research, and this would capture qualitative data from the focus group interviews in the form of transcripts from the interviews. And then we also conducted a survey before they participated in the focus group. Why did we choose focus groups? Well, we opted to go for the qualitative method because some of the quantitative research on this sort of topic has been done. There have been surveys that have been done, and there's data out there. But we chose focus groups to add some kind of more dimension to this topic. because there's a lot of comfortability in this sort of interviewing style. These individuals work together as a crew, and they're very comfortable in their modules, the day-to-day operations. So we thought it would be appropriate for them to kind of participate in the research as kind of modules as well. It adds more dimension, and kind of with that, there's no forced response like there is like potentially in a survey. They don't have to choose one that they feel is the most relevant. They can speak freely, they can speak more in depth. People will talk a lot longer than they'll want to type. Time savings, because we interviewed, not only because we interviewed and they were speaking with us, but because it was not just an individual interview, it was a group interview. And there was also quite a high engagement level of the participants because they were able to interact with each other, go off on tangents, whatever they wanted. But there was a lot more engagement level because it was more of a conversation, and the topics were of interest to them. But this style let them be very engaged. So as I mentioned, the moderator kind of guides the group through a question string. So typically questions start more general and they get more specific as the conversation goes on. So examples include kind of early on, how do you choose when and what you eat on a fire assignment? We would like you to think about receiving nutrition information on a fire assignment. What would you like to know? So as the conversation goes on, they get more specific, and then it finishes up with something like, of all the topics discussed today, what was the most important to you, to give them the chance to say anything that they felt like they needed to say. So setting up for the focus groups involved reaching out to crew supervisors or potentially folks on those crews, somebody we had in places. So we reached out to crews and set up the focus groups. We really strived to get the whole spread of resource types, or at least experience from each resource type, to have representation. And then once the focus group was kind of coordinated, we traveled to various bases to conduct the actual interview, which was fun to kind of interview them where they're at, where they received the briefing, where they're very comfortable. And we followed, of course, all of the recommended COVID-19 protocols up to the point where we were prepared to do this via Zoom if we had to, and had the IRB approval, and even went through a trial of the focus group session via Zoom. So we had the option, but I'm pretty grateful that we were able to do these in person because I really think it was a much richer data set because of that. There was much more involvement. So was grateful for that. What did it look like to participate? So participants agreed. We talked them into it. They signed an informed consent. So that was gone over. And we familiarized them with the focus group process since most of them had never heard of that. A demographic survey was completed. The focus group interview itself was conducted and recorded. And then once that was complete, we gave them compensation and put their name in the drawing for a jet boil. So their compensation was a snack box, because as you can tell, I really like snacks, but also because the Wildland Firefighter utilizes a lot of calories throughout the day, and they were all very eager to get this sort of compensation. So we kind of designed this from the ideal shift food survey responses for the Wildland Firefighter that they had responded to. So we also included a drawing for a jet boil backpacking stove because it's kind of a commonly used item in Wildland Firefighting. Tools for the job. So we utilized audio recorders to capture the interviews, 2 of them at once, just in case. Then we uploaded the recordings to a software program called Otter AI, which thankfully did predicted transcription. So it was very helpful in starting the process. But there were some pretty hilarious predictions that were not accurate. So I guess from the moderator's point of view, it was very valuable to know the terminology because like many industries, there's a lot of slang and kind of terms that are used that somebody with outside experience wouldn't necessarily understand. So I was grateful to know kind of what they meant by a lot of the acronyms and slang terms and kind of decipher some of the language. So then once we really polished the transcriptions, then it came to analyzing the data. So focus groups are oftentimes reported kind of thematically, so generating themes from the different statements that are said and kind of tones that come out of the transcriptions. So we were doing thematic analysis, and we attempted to utilize this MaxQDA program, which is kind of a qualitative data software. So I think it would be very useful if you were very familiar with the focus group process and how thematic analysis worked. But I'm very used to qualitative research, so I had no clue where to even begin. So I was very grateful in my readings of Kruger and Casey, my heroes. I found they even suggested if it's your first time going through and analyzing a focus group, use this constant comparative strategy. So I decided, well, we should kind of organize and try it that way. And it proved to be very effective. So I don't know why I felt the need to say this, but I kind of feel like it's going to like a family holiday and you're expected to produce results. It's a holiday, but you don't really know how to cook. So are you going to go to the newspaper and find the most complicated, like latest and greatest recipe? Probably not. No, you're going to use the old faithful grandma's bread rolls. So I decided to put the rolls up there because I kind of feel like constant comparative strategy is just a very practical way of going through things. I feel like it produced great results and there was no frills, there wasn't any unnecessary steps, and it was very easy to keep track of. So with that, I'll go into kind of the ingredients of the constant comparative strategy. So we needed a big room to spread out the work because these transcripts were printed. So we needed a lot of space. We also needed a paper copy, like I said, of each transcript, printed out in different colors depending on which session it was. So we were able to keep track of that. Scissors, of course, tape, sounds like arts and crafts, but sticky notes and colored pens, as well as flip charts to kind of tack everything to. So if you look around, you'll see kind of the results of some of that, arts and crafts. You also need, to make this process valid, a co-coder. And I was lucky to have a very enthusiastic one. Thanks, Annie. Actually, this was a really fun part of the process. We both had a good time and we were kind of sad when it was over. So I really enjoyed this part, actually. Here's a few pictures of us playing with colored paper. Like I said, transcripts were printed on the colored paper to keep track. Individual statements were screened using the constant comparative strategy, which I'll kind of get into a little later, but each quote from each individual was cut out, read out loud, and then we kind of, as individuals, thought, where would this fit in this whole framework? And then we kind of got our heads together and really made all of the different webs of themes and sub-themes. So we used the researcher as an instrument, we say, because that's kind of how it works with focus group analysis and thematic analysis. So the way that we validated this instrument was by using a co-coder because one individual might not be as legitimate. So we used 2 coders, made sure we had 2 people there at all times. Like I said, it was categorized into themes and sub-themes, kicked to flip charts, and then I went through at the end and summarized each of the flip charts question by question. So before I get into that, I'll show you a little bit. Here's the constant comparative strategy kind of screener. So with each quote, we would take and read and ask ourselves, did the participant answer the question that was asked? Yes, go to question 3. So we'll say yes, we'll go to question 3. Does the comment say something of importance about the topic? Well, yes or no. If it was no, it get put in a discard pile. So you see all the comments tacked to the wall. There's also all of this other information that we got that was the no pile, which it was fun to read and very interesting, but it didn't apply to our aims and our topic. So that's an area for future research, but I'll get into that later. So with the summarized themes, question by question, we came up with 20 single-spaced pages of results written out, just like descriptions of these webs. So quite in-depth results section, which made it kind of challenging to figure out what's important to share with you. because I think it's the neatest topic ever, but I know that you don't want to hear everything about it. So for you quantitative type folks, here are some stats. We had 5 focus groups held, a total of 27 participants, with 6 hours and 55 minutes total of interviews. The population was predominantly white and male, although that's pretty representative of the wildland firefighter population. So we still had some other folks in there, races and ethnicities, genders, but that's fairly representative, and we didn't want to try to kind of change that mix all that much because we wanted it to be representative. And a 6th focus group was recruited, but was actually dispatched to an incident and could not conveniently reschedule. So that's the reality of wildland fire research. You're always chasing them around. A little bit more talking about experience and kind of some of the different resource types we mentioned earlier. So we were able to interview 2 student association for fire ecology clubs on campus. And we also interviewed 1 hand crew, 1 engine module, and 1 group of smoke jumpers. But this doesn't necessarily look like the whole gamut of experience, but wildland firefighting experience was spanning the field as far as what they reported to us, other places that they had worked. So type 1 hotshot crews, Heller repeller crews, the whole spread was there. And also something interesting to note, think back to when I showed you the different regions in the US. So I thought it was pretty awesome that we had experience spanning the United States. So folks had worked in all the different field types in all the different regions in the United States. So we're going to talk now in the results section about achievement of these aims. So aim 1 of research was to describe the current state of wildland firefighter nutrition education. In the introductory survey, some ways they responded to when we asked them, where do you get your nutrition information from? So the majority of them got their information from other wildland firefighters and friends. And I think it's pretty interesting to point out that the 6-minute briefing, only 5% reported getting nutrition information from there, which is really kind of currently the only source of nutrition information for the wildland firefighter. And then also, shameless plug, only 5% got their information from a nutritionist or an RDN. So there's an avenue. Getting into some of the tables, this is how we kind of decided to organize the themes and the sub-themes. So if you look on the left, you've got the main theme, and then the central is the sub-themes that we generated that kind of align with the main theme. And then some select quotes. We couldn't have them all. Some select quotes that we're supporting. So I'll just point out here, when you see that denotion at the end, so smoke jumper is the type of crew or resource that they're on, and then 5 is the number of years of experience in wildland firefighting that they have. So these are kind of fun to look at. I'll just give you guys a minute to. I thought it was interesting in one of the sub-teams for the online resources that trends across multiple sources was mentioned. Also a credentialed source. This person says, not really looking at any specific websites, trying to notice a trend over multiple sources. And then the one above says, kind of see what their profile is and see what they've accomplished. And then getting into part B, how is education delivered? So we mentioned the recommended guard school curriculum of 4 minutes of nutrition content as what they're supposed to see, but none of the focus groups mentioned this as a source of information or recalled this time in their training. The 6 minutes for safety, like you saw in the survey, 5% reported that they went to 6 minutes for safety as a source of nutrition information or recalled that. And I'd also like to point out that because this is a lottery and this briefing happens every day, this is kind of generated at the end. I looked on the 6 minutes for safety website at this year and when nutrition would fall, and it already happened in January. So the majority of seasonal employees, which is kind of the bulk of the kind of on the ground workforce, will not see that information unless they go look at the briefing voluntarily, which I think I'm the only one that did that. So I thought that was very interesting to see that it's part of a lottery and that that's the only source that they have, but none of them will get that this year. None of the groups mentioned the Apprentice Academy, that they knew any apprentices or that they had attended. And none of the groups mentioned either one of these courses that are kind of limited offerings. So I thought that was quite interesting. If they did get the chance to see the 6 minutes for safety, it's supposed to last 6 minutes, so it's very minimal. So I just kind of wanted to show you what's listed on the 6 minutes for safety as the nutrition topic. So they get a basic recommendation about each macronutrient, carbs, fats, protein. They also get the recommendation to spread their kind of eating episodes out and consume 150 to 200 calories every 2 hours. There's emphasis placed on carbohydrate for performance, and a few nutrition discussion prompts are included at the end to kind of get the conversation going. So like I mentioned, 6 minutes for safety calendar, for this season, it's already rotated this topic through. So achievement of aim 2. Here's kind of one of the results tables that we had. So this was under the self-identification of nutrition education topics. So what they mentioned as kind of different avenues for education. So we asked them the question, we would like you to think about receiving nutrition information on a fire assignment. What would you like to know? And here's some of the themes that we generated. So under the main theme, general wildland firefighter recommendations, I'd like to point out as a sub-theme, energy balance. We kind of laughed when we read the 2 quotes, how to put on weight. And then the following person said, well, how to lose weight. So that was funny. So we got some sub-themes out of that, including nutrition for recovery, kind of goal setting, electrolytes, a number of topics, and then also navigating store stops or shopping for food. So they were interested in more guidance for grocery store stops and kind of crew meal purchasing, because some of them do support their crews with purchased food, as well as nutrition facts, understanding the nutrient fact panel, as well as the nutrition facts for the provided meals. When they're on an incident, they want to know kind of more of the nutrition of what they're being provided. This is just that table 5 continued. So same question, thinking about receiving information on a fire, what would you like to know? They want to know about nutrient periodization. So throughout the year, kind of how do I feel myself in the off season when I'm not as active and not doing back-to-back shifts? And then during the shift, how do I navigate fueling for the actual shift itself? So kind of like these supporting quotes say, differentiating between eating in your everyday life versus eating for performance and setting yourself up for success in this line of work. Also, the main theme, we don't know what we don't know, because we discovered a lot of misconceptions were held by the wildland firefighter as far as nutrition goes, which is common in the general public as well, but they were carrying a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of them felt just generally overwhelmed at the study of nutrition and even the topic itself. Also, some topics as determined by previous research, some of what's currently overlooked in the framework for education right now, or also misconceptions held by wildland firefighters. So since they really don't get any sort of nutrition education outside of maybe that 6 minutes for safety, it's wide open. So it would be great to start them with the basics, macronutrient 101, the importance of carbohydrates and arduous work, because we had heard some misconceptions surrounding that, as well as the role of protein in the body, the role of micronutrients and their importance for the wildland firefighters' health, justifications for the shift rations. We also got a lot of feedback just about the meals that were provided to them on incidents. They kind of took that as an opportunity to speak up about that, which we listened to openly. But there were some misconceptions there. The shift provisions are designed to kind of be eaten incrementally throughout the day, smaller portions. And yes, there are quite a number of more simple carbohydrates in there because of the role of carbohydrates in arduous work. So there's a justification for a lot of these items that are in there, But a lot of the perception of this shift provision is that it's just a bag of candy and garbage. And but if they kind of understood a little more of the role of those carbs in more simpler items, then it might justify the shift rations a little more for them. And then nutrition for long-term health, because a lot of these individuals might be doing this as a career. And this job is hard on the body. So nutrition could be one variable that we could kind of help them out with. So these are just a few ideas. It's wide open. And then describing implementation strategies for tailored nutrition education for the Wildland Firefighter. So here we're just kind of how we summarize the quotes. There was not really a direct question asked, but just some ideas that we came up with based on responses. So they're interested in some help during the off season and shoulder season. This is partially because that's kind of when they felt their attention span could tolerate education in something that's not directly relevant to their day-to-day operations. So one of them mentioned not wanting another PowerPoint, which I can't blame them at all. They get a lot of that in their trainings. So it could just become another meeting, they're saying. Took one thing out of it, passed around donuts. I thought that was pretty fun. And then somebody else wanted something more hands-on, so people are more willing to and open to learn about something that's hands-on and something that people will be more interested in. Another element is early in the career. So during that guard school time when they're supposed to get that 4 minutes, a lot of them saw value in getting this knowledge earlier in their career. Many of the more senior crew members said this would have saved me a lot of time and heartache and bellyache if I would have known this information when I started. And then also incorporated into pre-established sources of information. So podcasts they already follow, social media platforms that they follow already, they saw that that would be a useful avenue. Just a continuation of that, during the fire season more so. So strategies that they saw happening during the fire season. It seemed like those outside of the fire season, they were open to more like in-depth education. During the fire season, they wanted a little more simple, straightforward, easy to digest. So yeah, fun, light, eye-catching. Maybe they thought at camp they could do some visual things posted at mealtime as they're going through the dinner line, things like that. So some of them wanted, let's see. Some of them thought there would be value in the food unit leader role as being kind of an advocate for nutrition and maybe a potential educator. So on these large incidents, there's a role in the organization called the food unit leader, and they kind of oversee how firefighters are fed. So they saw this person as a potential resource for information. And then at the base, information from peers, since a lot of them do speak with their peers, 6 minutes for safety, as well as something posted just on the court quarter on work. So that's kind of how we summarize a few of the achievements of those aims from the focus group data. So there are a few potential limitations to focus groups, kind of the concept of groupthink, which is kind of our aversion to disagreement as humans. So in a group interview setting, we kind of all want to come to a consensus. So if somebody says something, even if you might not agree with it, there's kind of this groupthink, group sense, where we all kind of will agree with that person, even though we might not. So there's that limitation to focus group research. Kind of with that, the squeaky wheel, we witnessed it in every focus group. There were some people who just wanted to talk more, which was great, but sometimes they might overshadow something very important that somebody wanted to say that was less outgoing. And then moderator bias, right here, probably me. There's the potential for that. So I kind of want to hear what I want to hear, potentially, or want to interpret it the way that I would like it to be interpreted. So there's that bias. But with all these things in mind and the demonstrated want for nutrition education, where do we begin? So there are 3 delivery avenues that I kind of came up with and 3 content areas that I believe would be useful places to start, since it would be kind of a shock to the system if we gave them a whole lot of content all at once. So here are a few places where I could see education being inserted. Number 1 is a guard school. So a lot of wildland firefighters wanted to start with this information early in their career, and this is that environment to do so. So I kind of thought maybe some content could be built into meal times because they don't want another PowerPoint and they receive a lot of those at guard school. And it's a pretty fast-paced schedule. There's a lot of more important things like hazardous material and tactics in wildland firefighting that they need to get at this short 2 days. So I can understand if they wouldn't want to carve out a bunch of time for nutrition education. So I thought maybe it could be built into meal times, since a lot of them go to like a camp setting and share meal times anyways. Maybe it could be an opportunity for that hands-on learning that they're interested in, or more visual stuff. So guard school was mentioned as a potential source of information in every focus group. I also thought maybe like a peer educator type role, since a lot of them receive information from friends or other wildland firefighters. So that would be encouraging those with interest in nutrition and health, because not everybody's really all that interested in it. So finding those people within the crews and helping them build their knowledge with evidence-based information rather than whatever they find on the Wild West internet. So giving them tools to go back and share. Kind of the idea of train the trainer, because we don't have the capacity as nutrition professionals to go around and share this information. Maybe we could help those who are in the crews already. So this could be more impactful. And there are some opportunities, like I mentioned, the 2 later classes. That sounds like that could be a potential. We just have to kind of promote that and communicate those opportunities, since none of the focus groups mentioned those as things that they had heard of. Also, web-based content, since a lot of people do go to the web for nutrition information. There's already been a framework created here. In 2017, it was piloted. It's called The Black, and it's kind of a performance promoting website for the wildland firefighter, topics in physical training, nutrition, hydration, mental training, and injury prevention. So the framework is there, and it's pretty much exactly what wildland firefighters in the focus group described as what they want. And this sort of a resource could be available year-round. Even when seasonal employees get laid off, they could still use this as a resource. And new incoming wildland firefighters could look at this when they're in that panic state, wondering, how do I get in shape? How do I fuel myself? What is this job? They could go to something like this. So this was piloted, but it seems to have kind of deflated since then. And none of the focus groups had heard of it. Even some of us as researchers really haven't heard of this, although I think it would be a very awesome thing to get up and going again and kind of promote, because this is exactly what they described wanting. And a fortification of 6 minutes for safety topics. So expand on the content to include maybe some of the misconceptions. This could be a great way to update wildland firefighters on the latest research and what might be lacking kind of in the knowledge base in the field. So it might increase chances of receiving the information from a 1 in 223 chance. Maybe we could double that, triple it. I don't know. And because this briefing is a very widespread viewership. So this is not just like US Forest Service personnel. This is a way that the information could be given to the whole wildland fire force, since they all get this sort of situational report and information. So one other content area I thought would be useful would be fueling strategies. Nutrient periodization, kind of as they mentioned, wanting to know how to fuel for different days and different demands. Justifying the shift provision design. So there's a picture of kind of a typical shift provision. So that would justify kind of some of the items in there and let the firefighter think about them as tools for the job rather than this is just garbage, they're trying to make me fat. This would also empower the wildland firefighter with skills for fueling year-round. So if they kind of knew a little bit more about energy balance, fueling strategies, this would empower them with some of that knowledge to take into the off-season. And the final content area I think would be a great way to incorporate some education would be guidance for store stops. Since a lot of times, especially in travel or before an incident, wildland firefighters will be given per diem funds and be expected to go into a grocery store with limited amount of time and get the food for the next 24 hours, whatever it may be, or go in and choose some snacks for the next assignment. So I think, according to the focus group responses, this was a widespread source of panic because people were making rush decisions, falling back on less nutritious options because they just didn't know. They couldn't handle the overwhelming feeling of shopping on a limited time amount. And this would also be useful information for the off season, so we can continue to support the Wildland Firefighter even after they turn in their greens. So to keep with my theme of the briefing, I'd like to do a little bit of a debrief. So kind of revisit the leader's intent that I introduced to you initially. And that was to introduce. So hopefully I was able to introduce the Wildland Firefighter population, introduce the significance this population and this project has to me, and also the project. And then hopefully I was able to inform you on the kind of current state of nutrition education, and then report on what we found in our project, as well as make some suggestions for ways to move forward and ways to incorporate this. The significance that would be witnessed in the field. So the importance has been stated by the Wildland Firefighter, but we're still lacking the education to back this. Nutrition isn't provided year-round, so they need nutrition education to be able to navigate these off seasons, because we can develop great menus and perfect nutrition for those meals when they're in the fire season and being supported by camps. But then in the winter, they could spend half the year trying to navigate nutrition for themselves. So they need that information to be able to make those decisions. There's also potential for better retention of the workforce, as well as situational awareness, long-term health, overall morale, and endless benefits. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, this is one variable that we can change. There are a lot of variables in wildland firefighting that we can't. The conditions of the environment, the fire season, things like that. Those are variables that we can't really change. So this is one variable in safety and health that we can and should encourage some positive change. And application. So wildland firefighters want more education in health and safety topics, and they want them earlier. The focus groups resulted in education topics and modes of delivery. We succeeded in that. And further research would allow for deeper understanding and potential education that we could pilot and see how effective that might be. So I've done enough talking, and I think it's important to keep the conversation kind of going. And I thought that this quote in one of those conversations was a really great way to kind of summarize. So as one wildland firefighter put it, I think it is extremely important to learn about nutrition in this job. I think it's as valuable part of the job as learning to package a patient for medevac or the basic tactics used in fighting fire. You get out what you put in your body, and your body is a tool, just like a plastic is a tool. We need to spend as much time and more talking about the maintenance of our own well-being, like we spend time maintaining other tools in this work, because it is extremely important. So with that, I'd like to thank you for coming and listening and being interested, and open it up for questions. Okay, thanks for coming.
Great job.
You did good. Bye.
So Yimin has her hand raised.
Oh, yes, Yimin.
Well done, Heidi. Thank you so much for this presentation. My question is more, I wonder if you can comment on delivering nutrition education to them where they don't really have a lot of time, especially when they're on assignment. The possibility of, sending prompts to them throughout the day to, remind them healthy practices or like good nutrition practices while they're on the field. And or coupling that with designing like a simple interactive type of app that they can access. I don't know what their, connectivity is like when they're on the field.
Yeah, those are great points. And it just depends on where the fire's at, but like the rest of the world, they're pretty often connected and can utilize apps, things like that. And part of the Black interface, that web-based content that I was mentioning earlier, had started to develop an app, which I think could be encouraged, and that would be a great resource for them to utilize while in the field. And also on the point of the shift provisions that they get, maybe incorporating some educational content there. I think that's also a great idea, even just like some sort of slip or an insert for the day, something to keep in mind, a sticker, love stickers, something tacked to like the sandwich or something like that, encouraging them to cut it in half and split up that ration. I think that's a really great idea.
Like a fortune cookie message in a power bar.
I love it. Anybody else?
Heidi, I have lots of questions, but I'm gonna connect with you later on.
Let's get coffee.
All right.
Okay. Dr. Batts.
So I really like that that idea of the app, and I think that's your $1 million idea once you can figure that thing out. There's a lot of you mentioned there's a lot of different jobs, and so this last fire season I was just a tender driver, but I still got the same grub as the line guys, and I probably got fat off of all that stuff. So it would be interesting to see if you could come up with the app, or what are your, well, okay, so it'd be interesting to see if you can come up with an app that you can select what it is that your task is, because I didn't need to sit and eat all the cookies. I needed to just probably not eat anything really. I was just getting fat, like I said. But what would be a simple way, and I think you've already alluded to it already, but to try to identify those individuals that maybe don't have as aggressive of a task, or focus on the ones that truly do have an aggressive task, the sawyers and things like that, and how they can better use their general ration.
Yeah. At one point there was conversation on maybe we should make like 2 different rations, like one for the more camp-based or sedentary individual, and one for that person who is line going and who is needing those calories. And I think that's a useful idea, and it would need just quite a bit of checks and balances, just as far as, I guess, the risk of one of those line going individuals getting that kind of lunch that's shy on calories and energy. So there is some concern there. So I think it would be outside of changing the shift provisions, and an individual like yourself could just save the cookies for later, maybe. But yeah, having an app to kind of guide you as far as what are your activities for the day, or what are you doing for the day? What do you really need? I think that would be a useful way to do it. And maybe even simplify it to the point where it's just like 4 to 5 servings of carbs, and then give them that education on like, what does a serving of carbs look like? And then you could simplify it, not just say you need this many grams and this many calories. So maybe kind of simplifying it for the individual and having it connected to an app that they can refer to. Hopefully that answered your question and confirmed. Anybody else? Any of the fruits in the back? Anybody on screen? Yeah. Joe D.
Got to get my mute button to work. Nice work, Heidi. Very nice presentation. Well done. I have a couple things. Why were Skittles not in your snack box for crews as part of the option?
Ooh, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I got them here. They're here in person, Joe.
I know, I'm a gummy bear. Gummy bear is my go-to, so I would have given you gummy bear. So now, I guess, did you find that the credentials of the individuals presenting information was critical to firefighters? Or is it just whoever's presenting it, at like a training, whoever is going to present it, we're going to listen to? Or did people say education for this topic was important in who was delivering the information?
One thing I thought was interesting that they mentioned as far as who's delivering the content was one group really emphasized that they thought it was important that an outside individual, somebody outside of the agency, just to really add that kind of interest factor, I suppose. They didn't want it to feel like it was just another Forest Service class, and they didn't want like an agency person necessarily coming in and teaching that class the same way that they have to all be taught. So they didn't mention as much about the credentials of that individual as far as who was presenting the information, but they did want valid information presented. But they did surprisingly mention that they didn't want a Forest Service person teaching it. They wanted to keep that uniqueness of the content, something that's brought in from somebody in the actual nutrition or health field would be great, but they just wanted an outside person.
Thank you.
No, I know. We'll inform them. Anybody else?
I have a question, Heidi.
Yeah.
So a lot of topics have come up about feeding them on assignment or direct education in the SAC launcher shift food provisions. Could you speak to the complexity of feeding wildland firefighters, and how would nutrition education professionals be able to disseminate adequate education if we don't necessarily know what food is being offered or when it's offered?
Yeah, that's a great point because the feeding environment for the wildland firefighter is very unique. On these large type 1 camps, it's just a series of large trucks and almost like a city appears in a field or whatever space is large enough, maybe very remote, maybe challenges in getting the actual meals there. So yes, the wildland firefighter feeding environment is very complex, and the way that they fuel themselves throughout the day is very complex because they're expected to carry their shift provisions on their back with them out on the line. And I guess with that, it makes me think of the fact that they probably don't want to carry anything additional. So even if we incorporated like a neat little slip in their paper, I mean, they don't even want to take the Raisinets out on the line because that's extra weight. So they might not bring anything unnecessary. So they might just pitch it right off the bat. I don't know. I think it would take some piloting to find out, like, how should we be incorporating this into their day-to-day activities? What's going to be the best time of day? What's the best avenue? So yeah, for further research, I think it's needed.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So we all probably in this room think that nutrition is the most important because that's what we study. But there's also a reason why they're not receiving nutrition education. There's like so many other components to learn, like you were mentioning, right? So can you elaborate a little bit more on why is nutrition education important? Is it actually, is nutrition deficiency related to injury on the line? Like, how is this directly going to impact? So just, great, we improve their knowledge. Does that actually decrease their risk of being injured? How is this important in terms of them being able to do their job?
Yeah, great point, because I think, especially in such a large governmental agency, it's going to be very hard to convince anything additional or to change their flow if it's not very justified. So to say, like, this information is very important, they need to, have a well-balanced diet, that's not enough for sure. But there is some evidence to prove that, like, better nutrition, or as far as like carbohydrate intake and cognition, it increases like reaction time, which is very valuable in the wildland firefighting sense in the case of overhead hazards or debris falling, things like that. So there's a justification, and just overall performance and work output is higher if nutrition is more attended to. But this just has to be communicated to those who are making the actual decisions of what gets implemented and what they're willing to accept, because I think the importance is there and there's evidence to back that, but it's kind of, I guess, new age to, or maybe a little touchy-feely to talk about the wildland firefighters' health, well-being, as well as mental health, things like that. Some of the more holistic health sort of approaches to the human being, and that element that the wildland firefighter is a tool and they need to maintain their bodies as well as they maintain their chainsaws, things like that. So as long as that could be effectively communicated, I think there could be some buy-in, but it would take, I think, a lot of time to kind of implement all these things.
And just kind of as a follow-up to that, you had mentioned the idea of, or maybe it was a theme that came up, but the concept of nutrition periodization seems almost impossible for a wildland firefighter, because typically, right, with like an athlete, you know that they do these things in practice and this is how long their game lasts. That is not the case with this population. So how on earth could you possibly provide them nutrition education so that they can make on-the-spot decisions themselves to do their own periodization, right? They don't have some of you there to tell them when to do things. So what would be, I guess, a couple of important topics in education to help them be able to do things on the spot?
I think just keeping it very simplified, and also, I guess, giving them kind of cues maybe as far as like, here's kind of the time, here's around the amount of time. If you're working hard, here's about how often you should eat, things like that, or other like physical clues to cue into that indicate hunger, or like, I don't know, I guess it would be important to teach them how to tune into their own bodies, because you can train the trainer or that peer that they can learn from on the crew, but at the end of the day, like, they're the ones who have to navigate feeding themselves. So they need to know, how do I adapt to the changing situation? Because yeah, they could think that they're going to be, just patrolling line or something all day and kind of eat leisurely, maybe leave half their lunch back at the truck, and then something could change and they could be, fighting active fire and staying through the night. So they need to be prepared. And yeah, having a good knowledge base, but a working knowledge base is important for that.
Yumin has your hand up again.
Yumin!
Hello. Okay. So this is obviously a really kind of large and chronic systemic issue you're trying to tackle here. And so with that in mind, in the next 10 years, based on your findings, how would you tackle this issue of increasing nutrition education in wildland firefighters? And what are the feasible, logical steps that you would want to take? And what outcomes are important to measure?
Great question. That means I have to have a plan, and I love plans. So I think a great place to start would be their start. I think that's a very important place to incorporate education, is this kind of guard school environment. So I think I would start there, but I'm not going to change the whole Forest Service at once. So I think it would be important to start by kind of piloting that, maybe at one of the local guard schools, come up with some different nutrition education, maybe something to incorporate during the mealtime while they're at this training, guard school. So incorporate some education in the mealtime. And then I also was thinking maybe during their field exercises, you could have, they have different stations that they go around to. Maybe you could have them come over to the fueling station and kind of start that conversation there as well. So just introducing them to the idea there. And then, because all of wildland firefighters need a basic understanding of tactical athlete nutrition to do their best, really. I mean, they can get by, but to do their best, they need an idea. So at guard school, you could cover the whole population. And then later on down the road, it would be important to kind of encourage those within the crew who have interest to go out and learn more about it if they'd like, and then be that resource on the crew. And also, I think it's going to be important to kind of shift the thinking of the overhead and kind of the culture to not be as stubborn and to accept, like, it's okay to think about our health and our well-being and to encourage our crew, like ask how they're doing, you know, physically, mentally, all these things. So I think it's important to kind of, not that I'm going to say I'm going to change the culture, but a cultural shift is very important to be receptive to this information. So I would start by piloting it at guard school and then kind of further develop some of the boosters of information for those who want it, and can be resources on the crew. And then I would just continue to advocate for wildland firefighter health and kind of the nutrition research on it all. And then follow-ups would be, I suppose, maybe a follow-up survey similar to what was done in 2003. They did a nutritional attitudes and beliefs survey over at UM. I think it would be very interesting to conduct a similar survey to that and see if things have changed, because that was done in 2003. And then most recently, now that I've done my focus group research, not much has changed as far as misconceptions and the beliefs. So it might be useful to use that tool again to kind of reevaluate after some of this has been incorporated and has been kind of moved around in the organization. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And what outcomes would you measure? And this kind of goes back to what Anne was asking, you know, actual functional outcomes.
Yeah, functional outcomes. I mean, I'd say greater work output or less injury, but that's really hard to measure. There's so many other variables involved. So honestly, just maybe nutritional knowledge. It would be useful to reassess that belief study that was done with the survey and see if any of that information has changed, any of those statistics, just because some of the other variables that this could benefit would be too hard to measure whether this was actually what was improved or not.
Any physiological outcomes that could, you know, maybe indirectly then relate to their functional outcomes?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Let me think
Thank
on
you.
that. Yeah,
No problem.
Thank you.
And you got one here in the chat.
Oh, we have a chat. Okay, so D. Wilson asks, did the weight of the ration / space requirement to carry the ration come into discussion when in your focus groups? Is there any way guidance on what ration should be kept in your go bag to support 2 days of unsupported work? So that's a good question, Dakota. And no, there's currently no guidance on what sort of rations should be kept when you're going self-sufficient, kind of like you're talking about. Some of the weight and kind of space conversations came up because we were also interested in where they stored their items and how often they accessed them during the assignment. So there's no real guidance so far, but that was a big topic of conversation, especially because some of these crews go self-sufficient more often than not and do a lot of their own meal purchasing, and there's really no guidance on how to do that with kind of like a nutritional basis. Anybody else? Joe D.
Yeah, and before I ask my question, I want to give Heidi actually some props, a little bit of a follow-up to the self-sufficient. So when we went into our COVID mitigations, we had a lot more crews being isolated, remote, spiked out, and we put together a shelf-stable food box for a national solicitation on a contract, and Heidi was the leading person that developed all the specifications for those food boxes with her knowledge and her education and her practical experience, able to help us develop meal specifications for firefighters for 48 hours. So I want to give Heidi full credit for that, because that is being instituted again this year. This will be the second year of this national contract. So Heidi gets full credit for that. I guess my question for you, Heidi, is did you happen to see similar results in other populations for educational materials, high risk occupations, anything like that? Were you able to find, has anyone else ever done this, I guess is a better way to ask the question.
Yeah, that is a good question. And the first high risk population that I wanted to look into as far as focus group research and nutrition education was the military population, because oftentimes wildland firefighters are researched on the military's behalf and vice versa. And yes, there have been kind of nutritional knowledge focus groups and other research on nutrition education development for the military. The one thing that the military has going on is there's a pretty large framework already in place, and there's quite a bit of education that occurs and resources that are available. So that is definitely an avenue, maybe of collaboration in the future. And I know there's been some collaboration, but there's been some research similar to this in the military population. I'm not sure of other populations. Diana, do you have a question? Maybe she's just waving. Yeah.
I just wondering if you could describe a bit more in detail how you came to the decisions around what your final themes were when you finally decided that. You know, it's the whole process. If you just provide a bit more detail on how you finally got to this final themes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that if I could have bought stock in sticky notes, I would have, because there was a lot of tossing, throwing, and I'm glad that we kind of went through the screening process and made the organization. There was a lot of moving around that was involved, and kind of there was some combination, I guess, of some of the sub themes, but mostly we just kind of organized, okay, well, if we have sources of information and somebody mentions, you know, a website, then we kind of had online. And then also somebody mentioned my uncle knows a lot about this information. So then we kind of had individuals. And then with the written stuff, it was just kind of publications that people had mentioned or books, things like that. So really it was just kind of, we would get a question and think, okay, well, this is, you know, maybe the fact that it was a website. Then we thought kind of a mental track, okay, people are mentioning websites. And then really at the end, it was kind of the final, okay, what are our main themes here? Is it information they want to know during the season or in the off season? That seemed like two natural kind of dividers. So there was a lot of moving and shifting and relabeling that occurred. But yeah, then once we came to our final kind of draft, I suppose, then that's when we posted it to the whiteboard. But before that, it was a lot of moving around and reevaluating, and kind of that mental log of, okay, developing the web in our head, I guess. Yeah.
So within your final themes, then, was there approximately the equal quantity of quotes related to each theme, or were some themes smaller than others?
I was really hesitant, and I still am, to quantify anything in this project because I started wanting to count, like, well, how many times did they say this? But just because they said it more often doesn't necessarily mean that it's more important, I guess. I thought it was really important to listen to the transcriptions and kind of get the tone that the person was delivering that message with, because there were a few things that they did say a lot of times, but I wouldn't say that they were more important than some of the things that were said, just a few times or very like basically stated. So yeah, I did find myself wanting to count the number of times somebody said something or things like that, but I was hesitant to do so. And I think it's an effective way of like analyzing, I guess, this qualitative research. Yeah.
So did you end up having any kind of divergent type issues that didn't really fit into a theme that were still important?
Yes, that's a lot of these. That's a lot of these, which were, what's that? Yes. Yeah, so part of this, I guess, another facet of this project was we were interested in some of the PPE that they wear, and kind of with our questions, we were interested in how they access food on assignment. So a lot of them mentioned, things like pocket snacks. So it was relevant information, but it wasn't necessarily relevant to our aims. So we did have to eliminate or kind of put that off to the side. But it was hard to give them up because a lot of them are great quotes or really interesting information. But yeah, it kind of became a division between this is related to more of like the textiles and PPE sort of side of things, and this is more relevant to our aims. So there was that main division.
I suppose my question's not really about whether it's nutrition related or not nutrition related. Was it something that didn't really agree with one of your themes, but it's still nutrition related? How do you deal with those things?
Since I'm trying to scroll through.
Your bonus. I think she's asking the bonus themes that we had.
Could be. It's really hard to scroll through 6 hours of transcriptions in my mind because I know there's probably some really great examples of that. Man. Yeah, could be the bonus themes that we came up with that we weren't really expecting, I suppose, but that were really great pieces of information. Yeah, I mean, I don't know really how to further answer that question. Any other follow-ups?
No, thanks.
So just as a very, very much so non-qualitative person, is it normal to not include quantitative within focus group information that you receive back? Is that a typical way to go through results, to only use the qualitative piece? Or I guess I would just like a reasoning for why we didn't include numbers. If it's not normal to do that, then great.
Yeah, it's not normal to do that. And as with a more quantitative mind, it's hard not to want to quantify, like I was saying, the number of quotes or, the power of that statement or theme because more people were talking about this, because just because it's said more often doesn't make it more important. That's kind of the idea. Not to quantify it because that would make it seem like it was more important in the reporting phase. So it is normal to not quantify it outside of like demographic information, things like that.
So if a certain response or topic came up multiple times, the frequency at which it came up is not impactful?
I would say it was reassuring in the theme development, but it didn't make me say like, I should write this in bold letters, like this is a big deal. I would say that if it was said more often, it kind of confirmed like, okay, this is definitely a relevant theme. And as it evolved, maybe it was even partitioned into like more of a main theme, but there was never like the frequency of this being said makes me want to put it at like a higher priority, but it was just kind of reassuring to our theme development, I guess. Yeah.
Do you think the themes that came up had anything to do with the fact that your 27 participants are also totally volunteer, so might have already been a bit of a biased group because they're just generally more interested in participating in something like this?
Could be, yes.
Those that didn't participate probably maybe care less about nutrition, or right, like who's the population that are not the 27?
Yeah.
And what would have been the things that have come up had everyone been required to participate or something like that? So do you think that you do have some kind of bias already built into the themes that you found?
Potentially some, but each module that was asked, there was never an individual that was like, I don't want to participate. This is very interesting to me. So I thought that was interesting to find that if we asked them, they said yes. And I don't think it was because we were like, oh, well, they've participated in research before, maybe we'll ask them. It was fairly random, and yeah, I was pleased to find that people were very open to participate, but some in other wildland firefighter research experiences I've witnessed are not interested in nutrition. They are not interested in speaking with you about it. So we didn't draw any of those in this 27, but I imagine if they were captured in this population, there would have been maybe, I guess, minimal speaking on their behalf. They might not have wanted to participate or really engage in the conversation. And there also might have been more, I guess, we don't know what we don't know, because these individuals don't have that interest and background knowledge. That's how I would answer.
So do you think the ideas for moving forward and how to implement some of these awesome ideas, would they be impactful for everyone, or are they only going to be impactful for your 27 people that gave you responses?
I think some would take to it more than others, just like even in other wildland fire training. Some people really like knowing about pumps and knowing how they work, and they're the guy on the crew that knows about pumps. So if you have a question, you go to that guy. So those individuals on the crew who take interest in this maybe would be known on the crew as like, you know, I feel I'm going into the grocery store. Maybe I'll follow this person around because they're kind of the guy who takes interest in this. I don't think everybody will take to the information the same. Yeah.
So the whole idea of training the trainer then might be a pretty solid idea.
Yeah, definitely good avenue, I think. Strawberry.
Did you find in your focus groups that one group is more interested in the topic of nutrition than other groups, like the smoke jumper group is more involved in?
Good question. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that crews with more experience and kind of like the older participants, they didn't hold back in the focus group discussions, whereas there was almost more like group sense and wanting to agree in some of the younger populations, but in some of the more older participants and more independent ways of thinking, like the smoke jumper resource makes a lot of decisions on their own, and they're fine with their kind of take on things. They're very confident in it. They were willing to say whatever and disagree with each other and come up with like counter arguments. But I would say the nutrition knowledge base really didn't vary all that much. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, let's give Heidi another round of applause.
Do you want me to wait for you guys, or? Yeah, I'm totally.
Okay, everybody except Joe, thank you for coming. So then do I just?
Everybody lay on top of each other.
Proof excellent.